Ethan Smith stormed into the studio, his eyes blazing with fury. I was meticulously embroidering a lovebird onto the suit I intended to gift him when he roughly snatched it from my hands and tossed it to the ground like trash.
Is this how you treat your clients? By throwing them out?
His anger was palpable. He was a busy man and rarely visited the studio. On one occasion, he came late at night when everyone else had already left. I was diligently sewing diamonds onto a client's dress, so engrossed in my work that I didn't even notice someone had entered. It wasn't until my shoulders stiffened and I stood up to get a drink of water that I realized my cup was already full.
I like seeing you so focused, so I didn't want to disturb you.
Back in college, he often stood quietly behind me like this, saying that one day he would wear a suit I made with my own hands to marry me. I was always too busy preparing for various competitions to make him one. The needle pricked my finger as he yanked the suit, the sharp pain pulling me out of my reverie. I stared at the bead of blood for a long moment before his words finally registered.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
So he was here to defend Claire Thompson. I quickly pieced together what he must have heard. Claire had come to the studio to order a custom dress for the upcoming Golden Dove Awards, and I had supposedly thrown her out without a word. My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough. Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. Ethan Smith had lost his memory. I knew at the moment we reunited. He had forgotten all the unforgettable moments we shared. I ran into Ethan Smith again 3 months ago at a party. He stood there quietly, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, exuding elegance and nobility. Despite being surrounded by a colorful crowd, his expression remained cold and distant. Unlike me, who had barely managed to sneak into the event, he was the VIP guest the organizers had painstakingly invited.
I heard that 3 years ago, young Master Smith had a car accident. He not only forgot many things, but also had a drastic change in personality.
When I approached him, pretending to be tipsy, his expression didn't change. I guessed he was used to women throwing themselves at him. But he didn't push me away either.
The beauty mark at the corner of your eye is lovely.
He used to say that too, but back then, his lips would curl into a slight smile, and his eyes would sparkle. Now, his eyes were like cold pools, impossible to read no matter how hard I tried. But as long as it was him, I was willing to fall into the abyss, no matter how deep. After that night, I became Ethan Smith's lover. I gradually came to realize that he had forgotten our university days, the stars on the school field, the sunrise on Qingyun Mountain. He had forgotten me. Perhaps amnesia makes people gullible. Ethan Smith, the CEO of a publicly listed company, actually believed the lowly lies Claire Thompson told him. Claire Thompson did come to the studio during the day. Since Ethan and I got together, people always reminded me that Ethan had someone in his heart. That person wasn't me, but the newly crowned actress, Claire Thompson. A year ago, Claire left Ethan to pursue her acting career abroad, giving me the chance to step in as a stand-in. Although we were rivals in love, I had to admit, Claire deserved her fame. Her skin was flawless, her features striking, and she had a liveliness that the screen couldn't capture. Probably because we were indoors, she took off her sunglasses, and I immediately noticed the tear mole at the corner of her eye, in the exact same spot as mine.
There's $500,000 in here. Leave Ethan Smith.
I couldn't help but laugh at the cliché scenario. To Claire, my laugh was nothing short of a provocation.
Miss Thompson, this is a fashion studio. If you want to get rid of a beggar, you can go under the bridge.
She didn't get angry but laughed instead.
Too little? Women like you are indeed all about money.
Her delicate face was full of superiority and arrogance. I had to admit, I was indeed short on money. Defying my family's wishes, I chose to pursue fashion design after graduation instead of joining the family business, which led to my family cutting off my funds. Especially after I came to North City alone to find Ethan, I lost my last bit of support. My brother was threatened by our parents that if he dared to help me secretly, his card would be cut off too. They were just waiting for the day I ran out of resources and had to crawl back home to take over the family business. Even though the studio's rent for next month was still up in the air, I threw the card back at Claire's face and had my assistant show her out. I wouldn't take dirty money. I just didn't expect that the famous actress would stoop to tattling. The next day, Claire Thompson came to the studio, her eyes and brows filled with the pride of a victor. I asked my assistant, Anna Johnson, to take her measurements, but Claire flew into a rage, demanding why the designer wasn't doing it herself.
Your order is urgent, and the designer needs to work on the design sketches. Let me take your measurements.
No, I want Sophie Williams to do it personally.
Anna, unable to handle this demanding client, had no choice but to call me over. Claire dialed Ethan Smith's number in front of me and put the call on speaker. Ethan answered quickly, seemingly in the middle of a meeting. I heard him pause the meeting to listen to Claire.
Our studio doesn't respect me, sending an assistant to take my measurements.
Ethan spent a long time soothing her, but Claire insisted that I personally take her measurements. So, through Claire's phone, he said to me,
Sophie, please take Claire's measurements yourself.
Hearing his gentle tone, I felt a moment of disorientation. Back in college, whenever I had my period, my temper would become unusually irritable. No matter how much I took it out on Ethan, he would always patiently follow me, buying all sorts of supplements and traditional brown sugar, delivering them to my dormitory. He was as gentle then as he is now with Claire.
All right.
I don't remember how I finished taking Claire's measurements. I just kept telling myself that doing this would quickly resolve the matter. Ethan Smith lost his memory 3 years ago and has been with Claire Thompson since then. I wonder if, when he looks into Claire's eyes, any memories of me ever surface in his mind. My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan. The cold light reflected off his glasses, and his words were even colder.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
A woman like me? I pressed my injured finger and replied with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
A woman like me? I pressed my bleeding finger and replied with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. Just as I was about to leave, the door to Ethan Smith's house was opened from the outside. Standing at the entrance was Claire Thompson.
What are you doing here?
How do you know the password to Ethan Smith's house?
She suddenly laughed.
The password is my birthday. Didn't you know?
I really didn't. But now I do. I turned to ask the silent Ethan Smith.
Can you change the password?
He hesitated, and Claire tugged at his sleeve, prompting him to speak.
No.
Great. I wanted to shake his head and see what was inside. But I didn't. I just left in silence. Ethan Smith had changed so much. The old him would never have sold out his true feelings for profit. The car accident not only took his memory, but did it also take his true self? After much thought, I made a call.
Hello? Can you help me look into a car accident from 3 years ago?
I hadn't sought out Ethan Smith for a long time, throwing myself entirely into the studio. I often reminisced about the past.
Ethan and I had been in a relationship for 3 whole years, starting from my sophomore year. Breaking up upon graduation seemed like a curse hanging over college couples.
I swore before Buddha that I would never lose you, even if I lost myself.
He also said he wanted to settle down with me in South City, where the weather is spring-like all year round, my most desired place. But ever since he returned to North City, saying he needed to handle family matters, I hadn't heard from him again. I waited in South City for 2 years, finally saving enough money to move my fashion design studio to North City. Since I managed to get an invitation to a gala through a friend and wore a new dress from the studio, business had noticeably improved. Though it's hard to say how much of that was due to Ethan's influence, this studio is my life's work. Becoming a world-class designer has been my dream since childhood. To pursue this dream, I broke ties with my family and endured long periods of living in a basement and eating instant noodles. I wanted to prove that I could become an excellent designer. So as long as it benefits the studio, I welcome and accept it. The dress for Claire Thompson was finally ready after the last adjustments, just in time for the awards ceremony. When we sent it out, Anna Johnson and I both breathed a sigh of relief.
Finally, it's done. Great job, Sophie.
Couldn't have done it without you, Anna.
That day in the studio, I was halfway through a sketch when I received a call from Ethan Smith. What now? Is the actress too busy to keep him company today?
I got so absorbed in drawing that I lost track of time.
Are you hungry?
My hand paused, leaving an unintended on the paper.
I'm not hungry.
But I'm hungry. Will you join me for dinner?
Ethan's car arrived quickly. Judging by the timing, he must have set off the moment he dialed my number. He stood by the car door waiting for me, dressed casually, without his expensive gold-rimmed glasses. Long eyes, thin lips, a high nose bridge, and fair skin, he looked much like he did in college, the way I liked him best. The restaurant was lit by flickering candlelight, accompanied by the rich tones of a cello, creating a perfect atmosphere. After cutting my steak into bite-sized pieces, Ethan began to explain.
The group has been facing some financial issues lately. The Thompson family can help me out.
He looked up, pushing the plate towards me.
Sophie, please understand and don't make things difficult for Claire.
So, in his eyes, all of this was me deliberately making things hard for her? His words choked back the sentence I had been about to say. I can ask my dad for help.
Do you like her?
Ethan Smith's eyes lowered, but before he could respond, I received a call from Anna Johnson. She sounded frantic. Ignoring Ethan's reaction, I rushed to the studio and finally pieced together what had happened. Last night's Golden Dove Awards had topped the trending charts. The new Best Actress, Claire Thompson, had a wardrobe malfunction. As she stepped out of the car on the red carpet, the hem of her dress got caught in the door and tore easily. Later that night, she posted close-up photos on social media, sparking a heated discussion among netizens. Sharp-eyed viewers quickly noticed that the diamonds on the dress were fake, putting New York design studio in the spotlight. After understanding the whole situation, my assistant and I exchanged glances.
Sis, what do we do now? Before you came, I received several calls from clients asking for refunds.
She had been with me since the studio's inception, and seeing all our hard work go to waste brought her to the verge of tears. I patted her shoulder.
The innocent have nothing to fear. The dress Claire wore wasn't made by us.
Then why would she frame us?
Of course, it was because her boss was competing for the same man, but I just patted her head.
Kids don't need to know so much.
Luckily, our studio had a habit of filming the production process. To address the issue, I stayed up all night editing a video of the dress's creation. Our studio's short video account had been active but never gained much traction. So when we posted it, it was drowned out by the overwhelming criticism from the online community, making little impact. The next day, as soon as I opened the door, I was overwhelmed by flashing lights and a crowd of people condemning me. The entrance to the studio was packed with Claire Thompson's fans and reporters, all seeking justice for her. Especially her die-hard fans, who seemed so furious they looked like they wanted to tear me apart. A Bentley pulled up at the edge of the crowd. I recognized it as Ethan Smith's car. He hurriedly got out, clearly having rushed over. Ignoring the shoving crowd, I kept my eyes fixed on him, hoping he would push through and take me away. But just as he was striding towards me, he took a phone call and quickly turned back to his car. I read his lips. The two words were Claire Thompson. Standing there dazed in the crowd, I realized this was Ethan Smith's answer. I had to admit, our connection had faded along with his memories. Seeing that I neither defended myself nor resisted, the crowd grew more aggressive. I was pushed to the ground but remained silent, the flashing lights hurting my eyes. It hurt so much that tears welled up. Finally, Anna Johnson arrived with security, and the chaos was quelled. My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan. His icy demeanor was reflected in his cold words.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
A woman like me? I pressed my bleeding finger and replied with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. Narrator, tone, relieved after the party ended, my assistant and I returned to the studio with the dresses the models had worn. Just as I was about to head home, Ethan Smith followed me in. He approached step by step, trapping me with his long arms.
Who is he?
Narrator, tone, dismissive. I knew he was referring to Michael Carter.
None of your business.
His eyes narrowed dangerously.
Sophie Williams found a new backer, have you? You're really something.
I didn't want to explain his assumptions. I just quietly looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar person in front of me.
I haven't.
Narrator, tone, nostalgic. The person before me, aside from his face, bore no resemblance to the Ethan I remembered.
Didn't you like Ethan Smith? Why don't you continue liking him?
My calm attitude seemed to infuriate him. Ethan Smith gripped my shoulders tightly, causing me pain.
You're different now.
How am I different? Tell me, how are you different?
My back hit the cold wall, causing a dull pain. I pushed him away forcefully and looked into his slightly reddened eyes.
The Ethan I knew treated me like a treasure and would never be so rough with me.
Ethan Smith was momentarily stunned, his lips moved as if to say something, and he reached out as if to hold me. Just then, Claire Thompson walked in, and he quickly withdrew his hand as if burned.
Didn't I tell you to go home first?
I scoffed. Narrator, tone, indifferent. Claire Thompson didn't answer but pointed to two dresses hanging nearby.
How much for these two? I'll take them.
They were suits I had recently made for Ethan Smith, and the dress beside them was a matching set. Each collar had a red-billed lovebird I had hand-embroidered, and I hadn't had the chance to give them to him yet. Ethan Smith recognized them but said nothing about Claire's request. She reached out to take them.
Didn't you want them? They're on the floor. Pick them up yourself.
I snatched them from her hand, grabbed the tailor's scissors from the table, and shredded the dresses into pieces.
Sophie, what are you doing?
Cutting clothes, can't you see?
He had been looking forward to this set of clothes, but I thought there was no need for them to exist anymore. My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan. The cold light reflected off his glasses, and his words were even colder.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
I pressed my injured finger and replied with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. I don't know how Ethan Smith found out, but after being unconscious for 2 days, I woke up to see him. He was slumped by my bedside, unshaven and looking haggard. Perhaps sensing I was awake, he lifted his head to look at me, his eyes bloodshot.
Sophie, I'm sorry. The Smith family needs the Thompson family's funds. How about I set up a new studio for you? We can give it a new name.
No need. I pulled my hand away from his grasp. For the first time in 3 years, I called home. My brother, who was attending university in a neighboring city, flew to North City immediately and threw Ethan Smith out. I stayed in the hospital for over half a month. When I was discharged, I heard my brother packing his things and saying,
"Sis, did you know? That Claire Thompson, her family went bankrupt."
Really?
Dad did it. He couldn't let her get away with bullying you like that.
He was so angry he was gnashing his teeth. A few days ago, when I was on the phone with Mom, Dad was beside her saying I was disobedient, insisting on venturing out on my own and ending up hurt. The next day, Mom told me on WeChat that Dad had secretly cried alone at night because he was heartbroken. I wanted to go home. The person I had asked to investigate the accident from 3 years ago got back to me, saying they wanted to introduce me to someone. When I arrived at the cafe, there was an elderly man with white hair sitting inside. He said he was the old butler of the Smith family. Then he told me a story. The Smith family originally had 2 sons, twins, one named Ethan Smith and the other Evan Smith. Mr. Smith Sr. preferred Ethan, so he designated Ethan as the heir of the Smith business empire in his will, with Ethan's cousin as the second in line. Both sons were in the car during the accident. One died, and the other lost his memory. Mrs. Smith, to ensure her family's inheritance, decided that the surviving son, whoever he was, would live as Ethan Smith. He only dared to speak of this now, after leaving the Smith family. The old butler handed me a ring, saying it was a relic from the son who died. I recognized it. It was part of a pair of rings Ethan and I had made together, with New York engraved inside by my own hand. All my questions were answered. It turns out my Ethan hadn't changed his heart. He had died 3 years ago. But he was gone. I returned to South City. This was the place Ethan and I had agreed to come to. My family, feeling sorry for the hardships I endured, no longer forced me to work at the family company. They bought me an apartment in South City and unfroze my credit cards. Evan Smith started appearing outside my building. The first time I saw him, he was standing under a street lamp, with a pile of cigarette butts on the trash can beside him, looking like he had been waiting for a long time. I pretended not to see him and walked straight past. He grabbed my wrist. I quickly shook him off. Now, even a touch from him makes me feel disgusted.
Sophie, I was wrong. Can you forgive me?
How could it be your fault? It was my fault.
My fault was not recognizing that the person in front of me was not the same as Ethan. My fault was letting this person destroy New York, which represented Ethan and me, in just a few short months.
What? The Thompson family has fallen, and they can't provide funds to the Smith family anymore?
Sophie, I didn't come to you for money.
I mimicked his tone from back then and sneered.
A man like you loves money the most, don't you?
It's just that his face looks exactly like Ethan's, which made me never doubt him for so long. Now that I think about it, how could someone like him be my Ethan? My Ethan, how could he ever treat me like this? I dreamt of Ethan again. He was still standing under that camphor tree, wearing the matching couple's hoodie we both had. The sunlight was still bright, and he stood there with a gentle smile. I started to run towards him, but for some reason, no matter how hard I tried, my body wouldn't move. I watched as Ethan's figure began to fade with the sunlight. In my dream, I cried out in desperation.
I'm sorry, Ethan.
The person across from me walked over and pulled me into an embrace.
Silly girl. I swore before Buddha that I would never abandon you, even if I lost myself.
I woke up in the middle of the night, my pillow damp. Evan Smith sent a bunch of potted plants to my doorstep, identical to the ones I had planted at his house before. I ignored them, letting the property management clear them away as trash. Evan was persistent. No matter how I treated him, he kept sending various things, as if trying to make amends. It was raining heavily that day, and I mentioned wanting a milk tea from across the street. Evan went out in the rain to get it for me. When he returned, he was soaked from head to toe, dripping water everywhere.
Here's your milk tea.
It's dirty. I don't want it.
Just as he was about to turn and leave, I called out to him.
Evan Smith, you never lost your memory, did you?
The figure before me suddenly froze. Narrator, tone, serious. Evan Smith turned around, his expression conflicted.
Evan, tone, sad I've fallen for you, but the one you love is Ethan Smith.
Narrator, tone, serious. He said a lot at my doorstep, speaking of the grievances of always being overshadowed by Ethan since childhood.
Evan, tone, sad. Almost everyone preferred Ethan. I felt like a transparent person trailing behind him.
Narrator, tone, serious. He said he first noticed me because of the tear mole at the corner of my eye.
Evan, tone, sad back then, your eyes were full of him. I once came to the studio to see you, watching for 3 whole hours while you remained motionless, sewing.
Narrator, tone, serious. He thought, how could there be such a dedicated girl? But he later realized that even I was there for Ethan Smith.
Evan, tone, sad. The Smith Group was struggling financially due to poor management, so they indeed needed the Thompson family's investment support. And Claire Thompson, who had pursued Ethan for over a decade without ever receiving a response, had told him herself that she preferred the current Ethan Smith.
Narrator, tone, serious. I closed the door. Narrator, tone, serious. The neighborhood I lived in seemed to be some kind of magnet, attracting Claire Thompson as well. She must have come to see Evan Smith, standing before him with a pleading expression. Narrator, tone, serious. I went downstairs to throw out the trash and saw them at once. The moment Evan saw me, he rushed over to take the trash from my hands, completely ignoring the furious Claire. Narrator, tone, serious. Her appearance reminded me of something. I turned back to her.
Sophie, tone, serious. Want to know what it feels like to be falsely accused?
Narrator, tone, serious. Her usually proud, delicate face was replaced by fear, but she clearly didn't believe me, turning to coquettishly call out to Evan again. Narrator, tone, serious. Evan did not respond to her. I felt a strange buzzing in my mind, still unaccustomed to Ethan's icy demeanor. His glasses reflected the cold light as he spoke, his words cutting through the air.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
I pressed my bleeding finger, my laughter cold and bitter.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, and his tone softened slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
I gritted my teeth, my resolve unwavering.
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. My mind buzzed for a while. I still wasn't used to being treated this way by Ethan. The cold light reflected off his glasses, and his words were even colder.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
A woman like me? I pressed my injured finger and replied with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
He seemed to notice my injured finger, his tone softening slightly.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money. Evan Smith came to curry favor with me, and it was definitely not for the reasons he claimed. He simply changed his strategy after learning about my identity. This man is terrifyingly pragmatic and opportunistic, willing to endure any humiliation to achieve his goals. If I so much as beckoned to him, he would come running, all because of the Williams Group behind me. I looked at Evan Smith's familiar yet strange face. The old butler's words from that day echoed in my mind.
The family's cars are always checked by professionals, but for some reason, the airbag on the young master's side failed to deploy during the accident.
Evan Smith, I want to visit Ethan.
Ethan Smith was buried in the cemetery in North City, resting beside the grandfather he revered most. His photo on the tombstone bore the same smile as in my dreams, but the name inscribed was Evan Smith. I gently placed the bouquet of white roses in front of him. I could almost see him happily sniffing the flowers. Evan Smith, perhaps feeling uncomfortable seeing his own name on the tombstone, left shortly after bringing me here. I stayed by Ethan Smith's grave for an entire afternoon, apologizing to him repeatedly.
I'm sorry, Ethan, for misunderstanding you at first.
I'm sorry for not distinguishing between you and him from the beginning. I'm sorry for visiting you only now.
The room was filled with a tense silence as Ethan's cold gaze bore into me.
A woman like you, isn't money what you love the most?
I pressed my bleeding finger, trying to mask my pain with a cold laugh.
Yes, she just didn't offer enough.
Ethan's expression softened slightly as he noticed my injured finger.
$1 million for a custom dress for Claire. Is that enough?
I gritted my teeth, unwilling to show any vulnerability.
Miss Thompson is welcome to come for measurements anytime.
Only a fool would turn down money.